The first scream pierced the quiet evening air, sharp and chilling, shattering the fragile sense of calm that we managed to cling to. The sound echoed through the endless rows of corn, fading slowly as if the maze itself swallowed it. We froze, each one of us standing motionless at the edge of the cornfield, the flickering beams from our flashlights casting jittery shadows around us. There were 5 of us. Ethan, the daring one who'd thrown out the idea of hide-and-seek as a casual dare, stood confidently at the front of the group, a smirk barely visible under his hoodie's shadow. "Just to make Halloween interesting," he'd said with a casual shrug, as if the whole setup didn't faze him at all. Max, tall and broad-shouldered but the biggest scaredy cat of the bunch, looked like he wanted to bolt even before we'd entered. Beside him, Sarah kept her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her eyes darting around, barely hiding her discomfort. Then there was Lila, who was hard to read, her face a mask of indifference, her arms crossed as she waited impatiently for Ethan to start. And finally, me. I'd been wary from the moment we arrived, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach the closer we got to the maze. I wasn't one to scare easily, but the atmosphere tonight felt different, oppressive in a way I couldn't quite explain. The corn maze was sprawling, stretching out like a twisted labyrinth under the fading light. The corn stalks rose high above our heads, thick and unyielding, forming walls that seemed to close in the deeper we went. A light breeze whispered through the stalks, but the rustling felt off, as if the sounds were more than just the wind. Ethan led us forward, his flashlight cutting through the dimness as he explained the rules of our twisted game. "All right, here's the deal. We each get a couple minutes to hide, then one of us goes in to seek. No phones, no calling out for help," he added with a grin that was half playful, half menacing. "Just us, the maze, and whatever else is out there." He shrugged, unfazed by the unsettling atmosphere. "What do you mean, whatever else is out there?" Max asked, his voice betraying a nervous laugh. "Come on, don't tell me you believe in all those stories about haunted cornfields and creepy scarecrows coming to life," Ethan replied, rolling his eyes. But the look in his eyes said he wasn't entirely joking, and for a second, I caught a glint of something unreadable. I wanted to call it excitement, but it felt darker. We drew straws to decide who would be the first seeker, and I ended up with the short one. "Guess that's me," I mumbled, trying to suppress a shiver that had nothing to do with the chill in the air. The others scattered, each one disappearing into the maze at different points. As I waited, counting down the seconds, an odd feeling crept over me, like I was already being watched. After a few minutes, I clicked on my flashlight and stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the maze. The tall corn rose around me, creating narrow, claustrophobic paths that twisted and turned, each one looking exactly like the last. The darkness was near complete, only broken by the occasional gleam of moonlight that managed to slip through gaps in the corn. The silence was thick, almost smothering. I hadn't gone far when I heard it, a faint rustling, not like the breeze in the corn but something deliberate, just a few rows over. I froze, my heartbeat quickening. "Ethan?" I called softly, trying to keep my voice steady. No response, just the same eerie rustling, closer now. I shook it off, convincing myself it was nothing but nerves. I turned down another path, sweeping my flashlight across the rows, hoping to spot one of the others. That's when I saw it, a dark figure, barely visible, slipping between the rows just a few feet ahead of me. My heart leapt into my throat. I quickened my pace, moving down the row, but by the time I reached the spot where I'd seen the figure, there was nothing, just an empty, silent path stretching out in both directions. I hesitated, scanning my surroundings, but the figure was gone. A chill settled over me, an uneasy feeling that clung to me like a shadow. I kept moving, trying to focus on finding the others. The maze seemed endless, each path blending into the next, and the deeper I went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as if the corn was closing in, trapping me in its narrow, winding corridors. My flashlight flickered, and for a heart-stopping moment, I was plunged into darkness before the beam sputtered back to life. A low, whispering sound drifted through the corn, too quiet to make out, but undeniably there. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen, convinced I was imagining things. But the whispering grew louder, filling the air around me with a strange, unsettling cadence. It was almost like chanting. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and hollow in the dark. No response, just the whispering, fading and then growing louder again, like it was moving through the rows, circling me. I started walking faster, my footsteps crunching on the dry ground, my flashlight casting eerie shadows that danced on the corn. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking behind me, but there was nothing. Just the endless rows of corn, stretching on, with no end in sight. And then, out of nowhere, I stumbled upon Sarah. She was standing in the middle of a path, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with fear. "Sarah!" I called out, relief flooding through me as I rushed over to her. But as I got closer, I noticed something was wrong. She didn't respond, didn't even look at me, just stood there, staring at something beyond the rows. Her breathing was shallow, and her hands were clenched tightly at her sides, trembling. "Sarah, are you okay?" I asked, reaching out to touch her shoulder. She flinched, finally turning to look at me, but her eyes were vacant, as if she was looking right through me. "They're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're watching us." A shiver ran down my spine. "Who's watching us?" She shook her head, her gaze darting back to the rows, and without another word, she took off down the path, disappearing into the maze. I called after her, but she didn't stop, her footsteps fading into the distance. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. Something was definitely wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in the maze. The shadows seemed to thicken, closing in around me, and the whispering grew louder, an insistent, relentless murmur that seemed to come from every direction. I had to find the others, warn them. I turned down another path, my flashlight casting long, eerie shadows as I moved deeper into the maze. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath misting in front of me, each exhale hanging in the air like a ghostly apparition. A few rows ahead, I caught sight of another figure, standing perfectly still in the middle of the path. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized Max's broad silhouette, but something was off. He was facing away from me, his posture rigid, his head tilted slightly as if he was listening to something I couldn't hear. "Max?" I called out, but he didn't respond. I approached cautiously, each step feeling heavier than the last, my heart pounding in my chest. When I was just a few feet away, he turned to look at me, and I felt a surge of relief until I saw his face. His eyes were wide, almost unseeing, and his expression was one of pure terror. His mouth moved, but no words came out, just a low, trembling whisper that barely reached my ears. "They're here," he said, his voice a shaky echo of Sarah's words. I crouched low among the corn stalks, my breathing slow and measured as I waited for the seeker to pass. The dark maze felt like it was pressing down on me, the walls of corn growing tighter, narrowing the path until I could barely see more than a foot ahead. My flashlight was off to avoid giving away my position, and all I could hear was the quiet rustling of corn in the wind until a low, distant murmur broke the silence. I glanced around, straining to catch any hint of movement. My friends had each chosen their own paths, scattering into the maze as soon as Ethan gave the signal. But the longer I crouched there, the more a nagging feeling gnawed at me. It was the same feeling I had since we'd started the game, something lurking just beyond the rows of corn, hidden in the shadows. As I waited, my thoughts drifted to Sarah. I'd seen her a while back, her face pale, looking dazed as she muttered something about them watching us. The way she'd said it, it hadn't sounded like a joke. And then she disappeared down a row, her footsteps fading in the distance, leaving me with the chilling memory of her haunted gaze. As I shifted, the silence stretched on, becoming oppressive. It felt like I'd been hiding here for an eternity. I glanced at my watch, frowning as the seconds ticked by, and a new sense of unease washed over me. Ethan, the seeker, should have passed by now. He wasn't one to drag things out. But he was nowhere in sight. Then it hit me, Lila. I hadn't heard her at all since we'd started. Not a sound, not a glimpse of her flashlight. She'd been the first to disappear into the maze, moving fast and silently down the rows, but that had been almost 20 minutes ago. Since then, nothing. It was as if she'd vanished entirely. I stood up slowly, brushing dirt from my jeans, and turned on my flashlight. The faint beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow, empty path lined with corn that swayed gently in the breeze. I stepped up from my hiding spot, casting quick glances around me, trying to ignore the feeling that the maze itself was somehow watching. Lila? I called out, my voice sounding strange in the heavy silence. No answer, only the rustling of corn. My chest tightened with a mix of irritation and worry. She was probably just hiding too well for her own good, but the absence of any sound, any sign of her, was unsettling. I started moving deeper into the maze, calling at every few steps, my voice swallowed by the dense rows of corn. The wind picked up slightly, carrying with it an odd, metallic scent that made my stomach twist. It was faint but unmistakable, like copper or iron. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread creeping up my spine and pushed forward, determined to find her. Finally, as I turned down a path that twisted sharply to the left, something caught my eye. A faint glimmer in the dirt, scattered right in the middle of the narrow path. I moved closer, my flashlight casting its weak glow over the ground, and felt a jolt of alarm. There, half buried in the loose dirt, lay Lila's bracelet. I recognized it instantly. It was one she always wore, a thin silver chain with a small, heart-shaped charm. But now it lay in the dirt, as if she dropped it or something else had happened. My throat tightened as I knelt down, picking up the bracelet and turning it over in my fingers. The metal was cold, and an eerie silence seemed to settle around me as I studied it. Nearby, a few other belongings lay scattered, a notebook, a single earring, her flashlight lying just inches away. But there was no sign of Lila herself, no indication of where she'd gone or why she'd left these things behind. I reached down to pick up her flashlight, but as my fingers closed around it, I noticed something odd about the ground beneath me. Symbols. Strange, twisted shapes carved into the dirt, barely visible in the dim light. They were etched in a rough circle, each line jagged and sharp, forming a pattern that seemed wrong. I didn't recognize the symbols, but their angular, chaotic shapes filled me with a sick sense of foreboding. It was as if they'd been scratched into the earth with purpose, each line carrying a dark, unspoken meaning. A chill ran down my spine as I straightened up, my eyes fixed on the carvings. Who had made them? And why were they here, right where Lila's belongings had been scattered? Ethan. I called out, my voice shaking slightly. Max. Sarah. But the maze seemed to swallow my words, echoing them back to me in a distorted, hollow murmur. I took a step back, clutching Lila's bracelet tightly as I scanned the shadows around me, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. I stumbled away from the symbols, every instinct screaming at me to leave this place, to get out of the maze before what? I couldn't finish the thought, but the feeling of dread grew stronger, pressing down on me like a physical weight. As I backed away, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching from somewhere just out of sight. I whipped around, my flashlight beam darting across the rows of corn, catching only glimpses of shadows shifting and twisting. The footsteps continued, steady and unhurried, as if whoever, or whatever, was moving didn't care about being heard. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and called out, "Ethan? Max? This isn't funny anymore." The footsteps stopped abruptly, leaving only silence. My heart pounded, and I fought the urge to run. Instead, I took another cautious step forward, gripping the flashlight tightly, the beam trembling in my hand. Just as I was about to call again, I heard a soft whisper drift through the corn, low and unintelligible, but unmistakably close. It wasn't Ethan's voice, or Max's, or anyone else I recognized. The whisper was harsh, almost guttural, filled with an urgency that made my skin crawl. I took a step back, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. But nothing made sense. Not Lila's belongings, not the symbols, not the footsteps or the whispering voice. I turned and started to walk quickly down the path, hoping to put as much distance as possible between me and whatever lurked in the shadows. But the maze seemed to twist and shift around me, each turn leading to another row of identical corn, each path blending into the next in a dizzying, endless pattern. I heard more whispers, now coming from multiple directions, filling the air with a strange, rhythmic chant that set my nerves on edge. The symbols flashed in my mind, their jagged lines etched into my memory, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they meant something, that they were a warning or a message. As I walked, I caught glimpses of movement in the corners of my vision, fleeting shapes that vanished the moment I turned to look. My pulse raced, my thoughts jumbled and frantic. I didn't know how long I'd been in the maze, but it felt like hours, each minute stretching into an eternity. Finally, I saw a familiar figure up ahead, a silhouette standing motionless in the middle of the path. Relief flooded through me as I realized it was Max. I called, hurrying toward him, desperate for some sense of normalcy, some assurance that I wasn't alone in this nightmare. But as I got closer, I noticed something was off. Max's back was to me, and he was standing unnaturally still, his arms hanging limply at his sides, his head tilted slightly forward. The closer I got, the more my relief turned to unease. He wasn't moving, wasn't reacting to my voice or my footsteps. I stopped a few feet away, my flashlight illuminating his rigid form. "Max?" I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Slowly, he turned to face me, and the sight that met my eyes made my blood run cold. His face was pale, his eyes wide and empty, staring at me with a hollow expression that sent a jolt of fear through my body. His mouth moved, forming silent words, but no sound came out, just a faint rasping breath that barely reached my ears. "They are coming," he whispered finally, his voice barely audible, each word dripping with dread. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the rows of corn without another word, leaving me standing there alone, clutching Lila's bracelet, surrounded by shadows that seemed to close in tighter with every passing second. The whispers began as faint, nearly imperceptible sounds, drifting through the air like a distant breeze. At first, I thought it was just the rustling of the corn or the sound of leaves brushing against each other, but as I strained to listen, I realized it was something else, something darker. Low voices, almost chanting, echoing from somewhere deep within the maze. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakably unnatural, carrying a strange urgency that set my teeth on edge. I turned slowly, my flashlight casting a narrow beam down the shadowed path, but all I saw were the endless rows of corn, stretching out in every direction like a maze with no escape. I took a step back, gripping the flashlight so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The whispers grew louder, shifting from one direction to another, weaving through the maze as if whatever was making them was circling us, waiting. I wasn't alone for long. Just as the chanting reached a fever pitch, a rustling behind me made me whip around. Max stumbled into view, his eyes wide with terror, his breathing shallow and rapid. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Did you hear that?" he whispered, his voice shaking. I nodded, feeling a cold knot of dread settle in my stomach. "Yeah. It sounds like it's coming from all around us." Before I could say more, Sarah emerged from another path, her face pale, her eyes darting around as if expecting something to leap out at her from the shadows. Ethan followed close behind, his usual bravado visibly shaken. For a brief moment, I felt a strange sense of relief. At least we were all together now. But that relief was short-lived as the whispers shifted, growing softer, almost as if they knew we gathered and were waiting for the right moment to strike. Sarah pulled her hoodie tighter around her shoulders, shivering despite the warmth of the night. "Someone is messing with us." "It has to be," she said, her voice tense. "Ethan, if this is one of your stupid pranks." But Ethan shook his head, his face unusually solemn. "This isn't me, I swear. I wouldn't. I mean, I didn't plan anything like this." A skeptical look passed between us, but the seriousness in Ethan's eyes told me he was telling the truth. He might be reckless, but he wasn't a liar, not when things were serious. Besides, the fear etched on his face looked all too real. Lila wasn't with us. The thought hit me hard, and I felt a sudden pang of guilt. I'd let myself get so caught up in my own fear that I'd forgotten she was still missing. I opened my mouth to suggest we look for her when a flicker of movement caught my eye. A dark silhouette, standing perfectly still just beyond the edge of my flashlight's reach. I froze, the words dying in my throat. The others followed my gaze, and in an instant, all of our flashlights swung toward the shadow. The light illuminated a tall, motionless figure standing in the middle of the path, just a few yards away. It was too far to make out details, but something about the shape was wrong. The shoulders were hunched at an unnatural angle, the head tilted slightly to one side as if it was watching us with a twisted curiosity. Ethan took a step forward, his voice barely a whisper. "Lila? Is that you?" No response. The figure didn't move, didn't even flinch at the sudden glare of light. It just stood there, like a statue carved out of the shadows. My pulse thundered in my ears, and I felt the weight of dread pressing down on me, thick and suffocating. Max was the first to break the silence. "No way," he muttered, his voice trembling. That's not Lila. Look at it, it's too tall. And what's wrong with its arms?" He was right. The figure's arms hung at a strange angle, almost as if they'd been twisted or broken, the joints bending in ways that shouldn't have been possible. I felt a sickening chill crawl down my spine as I realized that whoever, or whatever, this was, it wasn't one of us. Sarah clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin as she whispered, "What do we do?" Ethan swallowed, his gaze fixed on the shadowy figure. We could try talking to it. Maybe it's just someone lost in the maze? But even he didn't sound convinced. The figure hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound, yet its presence was undeniably threatening. The whispers had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to press in from all sides. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to speak, my voice coming out as little more than a shaky whisper. "Hello? Do you need help?" No response. The figure remained still, its shadow stretching out across the path, an eerie, unnatural darkness that swallowed the light from our flashlights. And then, slowly, it began to move. Not toward us, but around us, its body shifting through the corn as if it were gliding, its movements fluid and silent. We backed away instinctively, our flashlights trained on the shifting shadow as it circled us, moving in and out of the rows with a strange, unsettling grace. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Max's voice cut through the silence, harsh and panicked. "This is messed up. I'm out. I don't care if we have to find our way back in the dark. I'm done." Ethan nodded, his face pale. "Let's just get out of here. We can call for help, get someone to search for Lila. This, whatever this is, it's not normal." We turned as one, our steps hurried but careful as we made our way back the way we'd come. The figure remained a shadow in the distance, watching us from the darkness, but it didn't follow. Instead, it stood there, its head cocked to the side, almost as if it were studying us, waiting. The whispers started up again, this time louder, more insistent, echoing through the maze like a dark melody. The voices overlapped, each one speaking a different language, a different tone, but together they created a cacophony that filled the night air, pressing against us from all sides. "Run," I whispered, barely able to get the word out. And we did. We ran, our footsteps pounding against the dirt, the flashlight beams bouncing wildly as we tore down the narrow path, desperate to escape the suffocating darkness of the maze. But the maze twisted and turned, each path looking the same as the last, and before long, we were hopelessly lost. Every row of corn, every shadow, every turn felt like a cruel mockery, leading us deeper into the heart of the maze rather than toward an exit. Panic surged in my chest as I realized we were trapped, surrounded by an endless maze with no way out. As we rounded a corner, Sarah suddenly stopped, her face going pale as she pointed at the ground. There, in the dirt, were more of the strange symbols I'd seen earlier, carved into the earth in jagged, chaotic patterns. But these were different, larger, more intricate, with lines that crossed and looped, creating a tangled web of shapes that seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy. Max backed away, his voice barely a whisper. What is this? Who would?" Before he could finish, we heard footsteps behind us, soft, deliberate, approaching with a slow, measured pace. We whipped around, our flashlights catching only shadows and empty air. But the footsteps continued, growing louder, closer, each step heavy and unhurried, like someone savoring our fear. Ethan held up his flashlight, his hand shaking. "Who's there? Show yourself." The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was only silence, the oppressive weight of the darkness pressing down on us, and then, slowly, the whispers started again, low and mocking, echoing from somewhere just out of sight. A new shadow appeared on the path ahead of us, different from the figure we'd seen before. This one was shorter, hunched, with a strange, lurching gait that sent a fresh wave of terror through me. It didn't glide like the first figure, it stumbled, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it were struggling to keep its balance. We backed away slowly, our flashlights trained on the shambling figure, each step filling me with a sickening dread. This time, there was no doubt in my mind. These weren't our friends, weren't even people. They were something else, something that didn't belong in our world, and they were watching us, toying with us, driving us deeper into the maze. As we turned to flee, the shadows around us seemed to close in, merging with the corn, the whispers growing louder until they filled the air with a relentless, maddening hum. Every direction looked the same, every path twisted back on itself, leading us in circles. We were trapped, surrounded by shadows that watched and waited, their whispers echoing through the night like a dark, twisted lullaby. And as we stumbled through the darkness, the realization hit me like a cold shock. We weren't alone in the maze. We never had been. Panic surged within me as we sprinted down yet another path, desperate for any sign of an exit, a way out of this nightmare. Our flashlights flickered, illuminating the same endless rows of corn, each turn leading us deeper into the maze rather than towards freedom. My heart pounded in my chest, the whispers echoing around us, weaving a tapestry of dread that wrapped tighter with every step. "Keep moving," Ethan shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "We can't stop. Just keep looking for a way out." But as I glanced around, a creeping sense of déjà vu washed over me. We had been here before, hadn't we? The corn stalks loomed like silent sentinels, their leaves rustling softly in the wind, yet their stillness felt wrong, as if they were watching us, waiting for something to unfold. "Wait!" I called out, skidding to a halt as I noticed something on the ground. There, etched into the dirt near the base of the corn stalks, were more of those disturbing symbols, twisted shapes that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. I crouched down, my flashlight illuminating the symbols in sharp relief. They were unlike anything I'd seen before, their jagged lines intertwining in a way that felt almost alive. "What is it?" Max asked, his voice strained as he turned to look over my shoulder. "What are those?" I traced the lines with my fingers, feeling a chill run down my spine. "I don't know, but I've seen them before." The memory flashed in my mind, snippets of images that felt almost like dreams, fleeting and elusive. "It's like I've walked this path already, like I'm trapped in some kind of loop." "Great," Sarah said, her voice trembling with frustration. "So we're stuck here? We're just going in circles?" I looked up, trying to shake off the sensation that we were being manipulated by some unseen force. The air felt heavier here, charged with an energy that prickled at my skin. "We need to move," I said, standing up quickly. "Let's go back the way we came. Maybe we can find a different path." But as we turned to retrace our steps, the whispers rose again, echoing through the corn like a sinister melody. It was as if the maze itself was alive, shifting and changing in response to our fear. The ground beneath us felt unstable, the very air thick with tension, pressing against my chest as we hurried forward. We followed the path we thought we'd come from, but as we pushed deeper into the maze, every turn felt wrong, like we were slipping into a nightmare from which we couldn't wake. I could see shadows shifting in the corners of my vision, flickers of movement that vanished as soon as I turned to look. It was disorienting, and I felt the familiar grip of anxiety tighten around my throat. "Can anyone see anything?" I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. "Anything that looks like an exit?" "Just more corn," Ethan yelled back, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "We can't keep going like this. There has to be a way out." I felt a surge of frustration and helplessness. Every path we took was indistinguishable from the last, and the feeling of being watched, of something lurking just beyond our sight, only grew stronger. The whispers faded momentarily, replaced by a heavy silence that was somehow more terrifying, as if the maze was holding its breath, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of something. A flash of movement, a figure, darting between the stalks of corn. My heart raced, and I turned my flashlight in that direction, illuminating the space where the shadow had vanished. "Did you see that?" I exclaimed, my pulse quickening. "Something's moving in there." Max's eyes widened, and he took a step back. "It's probably just one of the others trying to scare us. They're probably hiding, waiting for the right moment." But I shook my head, my heart pounding. No. This felt different. It felt wrong. The others exchanged anxious glances, uncertainty swirling in the air between us. The whispers returned, louder now, each voice overlapping with the next, creating a chaotic symphony of sound that sent chills down my spine. I pressed forward, determined to find the source of the movement. "Come on," I urged, my voice echoing against the stalks. "We have to see what's out there." As we moved cautiously down the path, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being led deeper into the maze, like prey being drawn toward a predator. The shapes of the corn stalks loomed above us, casting long shadows that danced in the flickering light of our flashlights. The whispers seemed to intensify, filling the air with a cacophony of words I couldn't comprehend, each syllable dripping with malice. I tried to block them out, but they burrowed into my mind, filling me with a sense of dread that was hard to ignore. And then I saw it, a symbol etched into a corn stalk, its jagged lines shimmering in the light. This one was larger than the others, more pronounced, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I stared at it. It looked like a warning, a dark sigil that resonated with an ancient power, pulsing as if it were alive. "What the hell is that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as she pointed at the stalk. "Is that more of those symbols?" "Yeah," I replied, swallowing hard. "But it's different. This one feels powerful." As I reached out to touch the symbol, a sudden rush of memories flooded my mind, flickering images of faces twisted in fear, of shadows stretching out against the corn, of voices chanting in a language I couldn't understand. I jerked my hand back, heart racing as I stumbled away from the stalk. "Guys, we need to get out of here," I said, panic rising in my voice. "This place is wrong. It feels like it's trying to trap us." But as I turned to find the others, the path had changed. Where we had just been standing was now a solid wall of corn, blocking our way back. My heart sank as the realization hit me. We were truly trapped. "What's going on?" Max shouted, his voice rising in panic. "Where's the way out?" It was right there. "We need to find another route," I insisted, my mind racing as I scanned the maze, searching for an escape. But every direction looked the same, every row of corn blending into the next, creating an endless sea of shadows. The whispers grew louder, echoing around us like a sinister chorus, each word filled with a malevolent energy that made my skin crawl. I could feel the maze shifting, its very essence twisting and warping as if it were alive, toying with us, leading us deeper into its dark heart. And then, just as we were about to turn and search for a new path, I caught sight of another figure in the distance. This one was different, much shorter and hunched, its movements jerky and erratic. A chill ran down my spine as it turned toward us, the darkness of the corn stalks swallowing the light from our flashlights. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice trembling as I stepped forward. "What do you want?" The figure didn't respond, didn't move closer. It simply stood there, a silhouette against the backdrop of the maze, a dark omen of what was to come. The whispers intensified, swirling around us in a frenzy, growing louder until they filled the air with an incomprehensible roar. "Get back! Ethan yelled, shoving me as the figure lurched forward, its form distorting in the shadows. I stumbled, nearly losing my balance as I tried to back away, but the maze shifted again, the ground uneven beneath my feet. "Run!" I shouted, urgency flooding my voice as we turned to flee. But the whispers rose in a crescendo, echoing through the corn like a dark melody, drowning out our footsteps, pushing us deeper into the maze, into the unknown. Every path felt like a trap, leading us further from the exit, every turn a reminder of our own helplessness. I could feel the presence behind us, watching and waiting, its energy palpable in the air, a dark force that thrived on our fear. As we ran, I felt the weight of the darkness closing in, wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud. The symbols blurred in my vision, each one a reminder of the dark power that controlled this place, and as the whispers swelled into a deafening roar, I knew one thing for certain: we were not alone. We were never alone. The oppressive darkness of the maze seemed to close in around us as we stumbled through the twisting paths, the whispers fading into a low hum that echoed ominously in my ears. My heart raced, and every instinct screamed at me to keep moving, to keep searching for a way out. But with every turn we took, the sense of being watched intensified, a feeling that something sinister was hunting us, stalking us through the labyrinthine rows of corn. It was Sarah who first spotted it, her flashlight beam catching the glint of something nestled among the stalks. "What is that?" she called out, her voice trembling as she stepped closer. We approached cautiously, and as we drew nearer, I could see that it was an old, worn-out toy, a ragged teddy bear, its fur matted and dirty, one missing. It was a haunting sight, and a chill ran down my spine as I picked it up, feeling the fabric's frail texture beneath my fingers. There was something unsettling about it, as if it had been left there deliberately, a dark marker in this twisted game. "Why would there be a toy out here?" Max asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This place is supposed to be just a corn maze. Who would leave something like this?" "I don't know," I replied, my heart racing. "But it doesn't feel right." Just then, Ethan let out a strangled gasp, pointing toward the ground. My gaze followed his finger, and I felt my stomach churn as I saw what he was looking at: bones. Small and brittle, scattered among the corn stalks like discarded remnants of something that once was. They were weathered and yellowed, their surface cracked and splintered, the very sight of them evoking a sense of dread that clung to the air. "What the hell?" Sarah said, her voice shaking as she took a step back. "This is seriously messed up." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I knelt down to examine the bones more closely. They were small, too small for any adult, child-sized. My heart raced as a sickening thought crossed my mind. They belong to kids, don't they?" Ethan swallowed hard, his face pale. "Yeah. And that's not all." He motioned to the ground near the bones, where another toy lay half buried in the dirt, a small wooden car, chipped and faded, the paint peeling away. "What's going on?" I felt a strange sense of dread wash over me, a knot tightening in my stomach. This maze wasn't just a place for fun, it was a graveyard of lost souls, a prison for those who had wandered too far and never found their way out. As we stood there, the air thickening with an unspeakable tension, flashes of memories suddenly surged through my mind, images that felt foreign and haunting, as if they belonged to someone else. I saw a child, a little girl with dark hair and bright eyes, laughing as she ran through a field of corn, her laughter echoing in the air. Then the laughter faded, replaced by her cries as she stumbled, lost and alone, the shadows of the maze closing in around her. "No!" I gasped, staggering back as the vision faded, replaced by the twisted reality of the maze. "What was that?" That wasn't me." "What's wrong?" Max asked, concern etching his features as he moved closer. "Did you see something?" I don't know," I stammered, shaking my head to clear the images. It was like I was inside someone else's memories. A little girl, she was here. She got lost. "Great," Ethan muttered, his voice edged with panic. "That's just what we need. More lost souls." I could feel the weight of those memories pressing down on me, suffocating and relentless. "We're not the first to be trapped here," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a cold wave. "There have been others, and they didn't make it out." The whispers started again, low and sinister, winding through the rows of corn like a dark lullaby, wrapping around us and pulling us deeper into the maze. I felt a chill run down my spine, a premonition that we were being hunted, that whatever dark force controlled this place was drawing us in, feeding off our fear and desperation. "We have to keep moving," I said, my voice shaky but resolute. "We can't stay here. We have to find a way out before it finds us." But as we turned to leave, I caught sight of something else in the shadows, more toys scattered in the dirt, more bones, remnants of lives once lived. The air grew thick with the scent of decay, and the whispers morphed into a low, mocking laughter that echoed through the maze, chilling me to the core. We pushed forward, trying to shake off the sense of impending doom, but with every step, I could feel the darkness closing in around us. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if they were warning us to turn back, to give up and surrender to the maze. "Keep moving," Ethan urged, but I could see the doubt etched on his face. We were all terrified, our minds racing with questions we couldn't answer, but the need to escape burned brighter than ever. As we pressed on, the path twisted and turned, leading us further into the heart of the maze. I could feel the darkness wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud, an unseen presence lurking just beyond our sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. And then, just as we rounded a corner, I caught sight of another figure in the distance, shorter and hunched, just like before. My heart raced as I stepped back, ready to run, but the figure held its ground, staring at us with hollow, unblinking eyes. "Guys," I said, my voice trembling. "We need to get out of here. Now." But before we could turn to run, the figure stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate, revealing a face that was a twisted parody of humanity. It had the features of a child but was warped and grotesque, a mockery of innocence that sent a wave of dread crashing over me. "Stay," it whispered, its voice echoing through the maze, and in that instant, I felt the walls of the maze close in, the shadows growing darker, more oppressive. We stood frozen, our flashlights trembling in our hands, the whispers rising into a chaotic frenzy around us. The air thickened with an unspeakable energy, and as the figure drew closer, I knew one thing for certain: we were not just being hunted, we were being claimed. This maze was a trap, and we were its prey. The figure before us loomed in the darkness, a grotesque mockery of innocence that filled me with a chilling dread. The whispers escalated into a cacophony, swirling around us like a tempest, drowning out rational thought. My heart raced as I turned to the others, but I could see the fear in their eyes, the panic that mirrored my own. "We need to get out of here," I shouted again, trying to drown out the chaos in my mind. But instead of urgency, I was met with uncertainty. "Maybe we should just stay still," Max suggested hesitantly, his voice wavering. "It can't hurt us if we don't provoke it, right?" "Are you insane?" Ethan shot back, anger bubbling beneath his fear. "We can't just stand here. We need to move. Now!" The tension crackled in the air like static electricity, igniting a fire that had been smoldering since we entered the maze. I could see the doubt creeping into their eyes, a realization that we were no longer just a group of friends caught in a prank, but potential threats to one another. Who knows what this place really is? Sarah accused, her voice trembling as she stepped away from us, glancing between the remaining friends. Is there something you're not telling us? Me? Ethan said incredulously, his face contorting in disbelief. I'm just as clueless as the rest of you. You think I'd willingly put myself in danger? Then why are you so eager to keep moving? Sarah pressed, her gaze hardening. Maybe you know more than you're letting on. What the hell, Sarah? I interjected, feeling the anger boiling inside me. This isn't helping. We need to stick together if we're going to find a way out. But the distrust was palpable, and I could see the rift forming among us, each person retreating into their own mind, suspicion spiraling as we faced an enemy we didn't understand. I'm just saying, Sarah continued, that there's something off about this maze. Something we're not seeing. Maybe one of us was brought here for a reason. The air grew heavy with silence, the whispers fading into an uneasy stillness as the truth settled over us. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, the dark power of the maze creeping into our hearts, turning us against one another. We were no longer united. We were fractured. Enough! I shouted, breaking the tension that hung between us. We can't let fear tear us apart. We need to find a way out, and we need to do it together. Please. But even as I spoke, I could see the doubt etched on their faces. The maze had turned us into strangers, breeding paranoia and mistrust. I'll be right back, I said, desperation clawing at my throat. I needed to clear my head, to find something, anything, that might lead us out of this hell. I took a step away from the group, heart pounding in my chest as I ventured deeper into the twisting corridors of corn. The stalks towered above me, looming shadows that felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with every step I took. I felt the weight of the dark energy surrounding me, pressing down like a heavy fog. The whispers returned, a soft murmur that sent chills racing down my spine. I wandered, desperate for a sign, and then, just ahead, I spotted something in the dirt, a disturbance, something scratched into the ground. My breath quickened as I approached, the feeling of dread settling deep within me as I knelt down to examine it more closely. It was a message, jagged lines carved into the earth, and as I traced my fingers over the symbols, a wave of revulsion washed over me. They were similar to the ones we had seen earlier, but these were different, more complex, more sinister. The offering must be made under the harvest moon. One must be chosen to keep the balance. My heart raced as I read the words, each letter striking me with the force of a hammer. An offering? A chosen one? What did this mean? It felt like a chilling invitation, a dark ritual connected to the very fabric of the maze. I could feel the memories flooding back, those fleeting images of the little girl playing in the corn, now intertwined with flashes of dark shadows, figures draped in cloaks, chanting as they danced around a flickering fire. The weight of their gaze bore down on me, the sense of inevitability curling around my throat like a noose. No, I whispered, shaking my head as I scrambled to my feet, fear clawing at my insides. I stumbled backward, heart racing as I turned to head back to the others, the weight of the message pressing down on me. But as I retraced my steps, the atmosphere had shifted. The whispers grew louder, a sinister chant that echoed through the rows of corn, weaving in and out of my thoughts. Shadows flitted just beyond my vision, and I could feel the presence of something watching, something waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When I finally returned to where the group had been standing, I found them in a heated argument, voices raised in anger and accusation. I can't believe you think I know anything about this. Ethan shouted, his fists clenched. You all think I brought us here? That I'm some kind of traitor? It's not just about you. Sarah snapped back. It's about what's happening to us. We're being hunted. Stop it. I shouted, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. They turned to me, eyes wide with confusion, anger, and fear. We need to focus on what we just discovered. There's something dark happening here, and we can't let it tear us apart. What did you find? Max asked, his voice wavering as he stepped forward. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of the message heavy on my mind. There are symbols scratched into the ground. They mention an offering, a balance that must be kept. I think this maze is part of something much bigger, something ritualistic. Their expressions shifted, disbelief turning into fear. What do you mean, an offering? Ethan demanded, his voice shaking. A chosen one, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. It sounds like we're not the first to be trapped here. We're part of something that's been happening for a long time. Great, Sarah said, her voice laced with sarcasm. So we're just pawns in some sick game? It's not a game, I retorted, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. This isn't just about us anymore. There are forces at play here that we don't understand. We need to stick together and find a way to break this cycle before it chooses one of us. As I spoke, I could see the doubt in their eyes giving way to something darker, a growing sense of panic. The whispers grew louder again, echoing our fears and feeding our uncertainty, amplifying the tension that hung thick in the air. What if one of us is meant to be the offering? Max asked quietly, his voice barely a whisper. A cold silence fell over us, each of us looking at one another with a mixture of fear and suspicion. The implications of his words hung heavy in the air, suffocating and terrifying. We can't let it come to that, I said, my voice firm but trembling. We have to escape. Together. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of the maze pressing down on us, an unseen force tugging at the edges of our sanity, pulling us into a darkness we might never escape. The trust between us was slipping, our unity fraying at the seams, and the darkness was ready to pounce. In that moment, I realized something chilling. The maze wasn't just hunting us, it was turning us against each other, feeding our fear and mistrust. And if we didn't find a way to break free, we would become nothing more than another offering to the darkness that thrived within its twisted heart. The atmosphere was thick with tension, like a coiled spring ready to snap, as we stood in a huddle, our breaths shallow and ragged. The whispers had receded, but the weight of paranoia hung heavily in the air, thick enough to choke us. It was as if the very maze itself was alive, watching and listening, feeding off our fear. I swear, I saw it. Ethan's voice broke through the uneasy silence, his eyes wide and frantic. I saw the thing that's been hunting us. It was right behind you, Sarah. What? Sarah's voice was a mixture of disbelief and fear. You're just trying to scare us. No! Ethan shouted, desperation cracking his voice. I'm serious. It had this grotesque face, all twisted and wrong. It was watching us. Maybe you're just seeing things, Max offered, but the doubt in his voice was palpable. We're all on edge. It's easy to imagine things. Easy to imagine? Ethan pressed, his voice rising. I felt it. I felt its breath on my neck. We're not safe here. It's toying with us. I could see the fear creeping into Sarah's expression, and I felt a cold knot of dread forming in my stomach. The idea of something hunting us, something that could change its appearance, was terrifying. What if it could mimic us? What did it look like? I asked, my voice trembling as I sought to quell the rising panic. Are you sure it wasn't just your imagination? It wasn't. It was real. Ethan insisted, his voice frantic. It looked like one of us. It was wearing your face, Sarah. It was laughing, and it was wrong. Sarah's face paled, and the fear in her eyes deepened. You're not making any sense. How could it look like me? I don't know. But I know what I saw. We need to get out of here, he yelled, taking a step back, his eyes darting around as if expecting the creature to emerge from the shadows at any moment. Stop. We can't just panic. I interjected, trying to hold the group together. We need to stay calm and think this through. If it can mimic our voices and looks, we have to be careful about who we trust. But the fear was already spiraling out of control. Max's eyes darted toward the shadows, and I could see the tension building in his posture. What if one of us is already? Before he could finish, a piercing shriek echoed through the maze, chilling us to the bone. It was a sound that didn't belong to any of us, a horrifying wail that seemed to resonate from the very walls of the corn maze. Run! I shouted, instinct taking over as we bolted in different directions, the terror forcing us apart. I felt my heart racing as I stumbled through the twisting paths, the whispers rising again, merging with the wailing, growing louder and more chaotic. I ran blindly, the corn stalks brushing against me like skeletal fingers, the air thick with the scent of decay. I couldn't tell where I was going, just that I had to put distance between myself and whatever was hunting us. I glanced back, my heart pounding, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure flitting through the rows, its shape indistinct but familiar. Ethan! I yelled, my voice swallowed by the shadows. Max. Sarah. But only silence greeted me, an oppressive stillness that seemed to mock my fear. The maze was a living entity, shifting and changing as I stumbled deeper into its heart, twisting my sense of direction until I could no longer tell which way was up. I stopped, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my ears. I had to regroup. They had to be nearby. Guys! I called out again, but the only response was the echo of my own voice, taunting me from the darkness. Suddenly, I heard a voice, Ethan's voice, soft and filled with urgency. Help! Over here! My heart leaped in my chest as I turned toward the sound, instinctively trusting the call. Ethan? I shouted back, racing toward the sound. But as I got closer, something felt off. The timbre of his voice, once familiar, now sounded wrong, laced with an eerie undertone that made my skin crawl. Please. It's trapped. I need your help, the voice pleaded, but there was an unsettling quality to it, a twisted echo that sent a shiver down my spine. I hesitated, suddenly aware that it could be a trick, a trap set by whatever hunted us. Where are you? I demanded, heart racing. Just around this corner. I can't get out. The voice sounded desperate, but I could hear the underlying edge of mockery, a sinister tone that made my blood run cold. Stay back. I shouted, adrenaline surging through me. I'm coming. I turned to run, but the path twisted and turned, the rows of corn shifting as if the maze was alive, conspiring against me. I was lost, truly lost, and as the shadows closed in, I felt the darkness pressing around me, suffocating and relentless. Then I heard it, a low growl, deep and resonant, reverberating through the air like the rumble of distant thunder. It was close, and I knew I had to move. I took off again, adrenaline fueling my flight, pushing me forward through the maze. As I ran, the whispers morphed into mocking laughter, echoing off the walls of the corn maze, taunting me. I could hear the voices of my friends mixed in, calling out in terror, their cries blending into a horrific symphony. "Help me! It's behind you! No, don't trust it!" The air around me crackled with tension, and I could feel the presence of something lurking just beyond the reach of my vision, always watching, always waiting. I dared not look back, fearing what I might see. In my frantic flight, I stumbled upon a clearing, a small pocket of open space surrounded by towering stalks. I paused to catch my breath, my heart hammering in my chest as I took in my surroundings. The space was eerie and quiet, but I could still feel it, the weight of the maze pressing down on me, the oppressive silence that made every nerve in my body scream. I had to find my friends. We had to stick together, or we would become prey. Suddenly, I heard movement, a rustling sound coming from behind me. I spun around, every instinct telling me to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground, terror paralyzing me. The figure emerged from the shadows, and my breath caught in my throat as I recognized it. It was Ethan, or at least it looked like him. "There you are," he exclaimed, relief flooding his voice. "I thought I'd lost you." But something in his demeanor felt off, the way his smile seemed stretched too wide, his eyes glimmering with an unnatural light. "What happened?" I asked cautiously, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. "I heard you calling," he said, his voice laced with an unsettling calmness. "We need to get out of here. Now. The others, they're gone." I could feel the panic rising within me again. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "They're not real anymore," he said, his tone shifting, the smile slipping from his face. "They've become part of the maze. You have to trust me. We have to go." A chilling wave of realization washed over me. "You're not Ethan," I gasped, stepping back. "You're not real." In that moment, his expression morphed, the facade crumbling to reveal something monstrous beneath, a creature that twisted and warped, shifting into a grotesque version of myself, mocking me with a mirrored grin. The whispers crescendoed, a chaotic symphony of laughter and agony that reverberated through the maze. I turned and ran, the creature's voice echoing behind me, its laughter a taunt that followed me through the shadows. "You can't escape. We're all part of it now." My mind raced as I navigated the maze, desperately searching for any sign of my friends, my heart pounding with each step. I was lost in a nightmare, trapped in a place where nothing was as it seemed. The walls of the maze twisted and shifted, the shadows deepening, and I could feel the darkness closing in around me. Every corner I turned only seemed to lead me deeper into the labyrinth, the very essence of the maze feeding on my fear, fueling its dark magic. I could hear whispers of my friends' voices, calling out in desperation, but I had no way of knowing who was real and who had been replaced. "Max!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with panic. "Sarah! Ethan!" The air grew heavier, the darkness thickening around me, and I could feel the presence of something watching, lurking just beyond my vision. I pushed forward, determined to find them, desperate to hold on to the hope that I wasn't alone in this twisted nightmare. But the maze was relentless, each turn leading me further away from the truth and deeper into the shadows. I could feel the whispers rising again, calling to me, wrapping around my mind like a dark cocoon. I had to break free. I had to find my friends before it was too late. And then, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, another figure, standing just beyond the reach of the light. I felt a rush of hope, a flicker of recognition that ignited my resolve. "Max, is that you?" I called, voice trembling. "Help," he shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "It's coming. We need to get out." I raced toward him, adrenaline pumping through my veins, only to find him backed against the wall of corn, eyes wide with terror. "What happened?" I asked breathlessly, scanning the area around us for any sign of danger. It's not just the maze," he stammered, trembling. "It's in our heads, playing tricks on us." I saw Sarah. She looked different. And then I heard Ethan calling me. It sounded just like him, but it was wrong. "What do you mean wrong?" I pressed, trying to keep the fear at bay. "Like it was mimicking his voice," Max said, glancing nervously around us. I couldn't tell if it was really him or if it was something else. The weight of his words sank into me like a stone. "We have to find the others. We can't trust anyone. It could be pretending to be any of us." Just as the realization hit me, the air around us shimmered, and the shadows seemed to deepen. The whispers returned, echoing our fears, entwining our thoughts in a dark tapestry of dread. "Guys," came a familiar voice, echoing from the shadows. It was Sarah, or at least it sounded like her. "I'm here. I'm okay. Stay back," Max shouted, holding his ground. "We don't know if it's really you." The figure stepped forward, and I could see Sarah's face, but something about it felt off. The smile that graced her lips didn't reach her eyes. Instead, they sparkled with a manic energy that sent chills down my spine. "I'm fine," she insisted, her voice lilting with an unnatural cheerfulness. "I just got lost for a bit. But it's okay now. We can leave together." "No!" I shouted, panic rising again. "It's a trick. It's not really her." "What do you mean?" she replied, her expression shifting to one confusion. "Of course, it's me. We have to stick together." I could see the shadows shifting behind her, creeping closer, the whispers rising to a fever pitch, mixing with our fears and feeding off the doubt that was rapidly consuming us. "We can't trust it," I yelled, the words spilling out of me in desperation. "You're not real. You can't be." Sarah's smile faltered, and in that moment, her face twisted grotesquely, the mask slipping to reveal a shadowy figure behind her, lurking just out of sight. "You think you can escape?" the creature taunted, its voice a distorted mix of our own. "You're trapped here, just like the others." Max and I exchanged a frantic glance, and before we could react, the shadows surged forward, engulfing Sarah in a whirlwind of darkness. "Run!" I shouted, adrenaline surging as I grabbed Max's arm, pulling him away from the chaos. The maze shifted and warped around us, twisting our sense of direction as we ran, the laughter of the creature echoing behind us, mingling with the whispers of our friends' voices. We sprinted through the maze, hearts racing, desperate to escape the darkness that threatened to consume us. I could feel the weight of our fears pressing down on us, and I knew we had to break free before the maze turned us into one of its lost souls. But with every turn, we found ourselves deeper in its grip, each path leading us further away from reality. The whispers grew louder, the shadows closing in, and I could feel the presence of something dark and malevolent lurking just out of reach, watching and waiting for its moment to strike. In the distance, I heard a low growl, the sound reverberating through the air like the rumble of distant thunder. It was close, and I could feel the panic rising within me again. We had to find a way out before it was too late. I stumbled through the winding paths of the corn maze, disoriented and desperate. My breaths came in ragged gasps, each inhalation laced with the stale scent of damp earth and decay. Panic clawed at my throat, suffocating me as I realized I was utterly alone. My friends were gone, swallowed by the darkness that had enveloped us, leaving only shadows and whispers in their place. Max? Sarah? Ethan? I shouted, my voice echoing eerily off the towering stalks. Each call felt more hollow than the last, absorbed by the oppressive silence that blanketed the maze. I pressed on, every step sending waves of dread coursing through me. As I turned yet another corner, the path abruptly shifted, the corn stalks rearranging themselves into a solid wall, trapping me in a dead end. My heart raced, and I slammed my palms against the stalks, desperate for a way out. No! This can't be happening. I screamed, my voice filled with anguish. Suddenly, the whispers returned, a cacophony of hissing voices swirling around me, mingling with the rustle of the corn. They spoke in fractured sentences, fragments of memories and pleas echoing in my mind. Help me, trapped, not alone, it knows. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the maddening sounds, but they seeped into my consciousness, filling me with a cold terror. I opened my eyes and turned slowly, scanning the darkness, searching for any sign of the entity that had haunted us. Show yourself, I demanded, my voice quavering but defiant. I felt a surge of determination. I had to confront whatever was lurking in the shadows. The air grew thick and heavy, the atmosphere crackling with tension. Slowly, a figure emerged from the gloom, its form shifting and indistinct, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of the maze. It seemed to ripple like smoke, each movement a mocking imitation of life. I felt my heart pound in my chest as I faced it, adrenaline flooding my veins. What are you? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you want? The figure stopped, its shape solidifying into something more defined, a creature that resembled a grotesque parody of a human, its features twisted and elongated, eyes glowing like embers in the dark. It was a horrifying reflection of all my fears, a manifestation of the darkness that dwelled within the maze. I am the keeper of the lost, it rasped, its voice a chorus of haunting echoes. Those who enter the maze become part of its essence, trapped in an eternal cycle of despair. I felt a chill creep down my spine. What happened to my friends? I demanded, anger and fear warring within me. They are mine now, the entity replied, its grin widening grotesquely. They wandered too deep, succumbing to the whispers. They are lost, just as you will be unless you embrace the darkness. Never! I shouted, clenching my fists. I won't become like them. The creature laughed, a sound that reverberated through the maze like thunder. You think you have a choice? The maze is a labyrinth of your own making. It feeds on your fears, your regrets, and your pain. You are already trapped. I shook my head, denial flooding my thoughts. I won't believe you. I can find a way out. Find a way, it taunted, moving closer, the shadows dancing around it. There is no way out. This place is a prison for the soul, an eternal labyrinth where the lost roam, searching for something that doesn't exist. Desperation surged within me. I took a step back, but the walls of the maze pressed in closer, closing me off from any escape. The whispers grew louder, overwhelming me with their sorrowful cries. I felt their pain, their longing for release, and it clawed at my sanity. Why are you doing this? I cried, feeling the weight of despair pressing down on me. What do you gain from tormenting us? The maze craves fear, it replied, its voice dripping with malice. Every scream, every moment of hopelessness feeds its power. You were chosen to be part of this, a new voice to add to the chorus of despair. The realization struck me like a physical blow. This was not just a game, it was a trap, a dark ritual woven into the very fabric of the maze. I could feel the shadows closing in, the air growing heavier as the whispers intensified, clawing at the edges of my mind. I had to break free. I couldn't let the darkness consume me like it had my friends. I focused on the memories of our laughter, the warmth of our bond, clinging to the hope that had flickered within me. You may have taken them, but you won't take me, I shouted defiantly. The entity recoiled, its form flickering, as if my words had pierced through the veil of darkness. You cannot resist forever, it hissed, fury lacing its tone. You will succumb to the maze, just like the others. No! I screamed, pushing against the walls of despair closing in around me. I refuse to be a part of your darkness. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I turned and ran, barreling into the shifting maze, the path swirling around me. The whispers followed, but I pushed them away, forcing myself to focus on the light, however faint it was. But the maze shifted with a mind of its own, closing off exits, forcing me deeper into its grip. I could feel the entity's presence lurking just behind me, its laughter echoing in my ears, taunting me with the futility of my escape. No! You won't catch me! I yelled, desperation lending me speed as I dashed through the corridors of corn, searching for an exit that felt ever elusive. Then, I stumbled into another clearing, an open space where the ground was bare, marked with strange symbols etched into the dirt. I froze, horror washing over me as I recognized the symbols from the tales the locals had whispered about, markings that hinted at ancient rituals, sacrifices made to appease the darkness of the maze. This is where it ends, the creature's voice echoed from behind me. I turned, heart racing, to see it looming just at the edge of the clearing. You can't escape what you were meant to become. With a surge of clarity, I understood. The maze was not just a physical entity, it was a reflection of our deepest fears, our regrets, and the darkness we all carried within. It thrived on despair, feeding on the souls it captured. But as I stood there, faced with the horrifying truth, I also felt a flicker of resolve ignite within me. I had the power to break this cycle, to defy the darkness. I turned to the symbols in the ground, desperation mingling with determination. If this is a ritual, then I can reverse it. I can break the bond. The creature laughed again, a sound that echoed with disbelief. You think you can change your fate? You are as lost as the others. But as I knelt before the symbols, I could feel the energy of the maze shifting, the air crackling with tension. I whispered words of defiance, pleading for strength and clarity, invoking the bond of friendship that had once bound us all. As I pressed my hands against the symbols, a surge of power coursed through me, and the ground trembled. The shadows roared, swirling around me in a chaotic frenzy, threatening to engulf me. But I held firm, focusing on the memories of my friends, our laughter, our bonds, the light we had shared. Together, we are stronger than you. I shouted, the energy surging to a climax. We will break free. The entity screamed, a sound of pure rage that echoed through the maze, shaking the very foundation of the ground beneath me. The shadows writhed, and I felt the grip of the maze loosen as the air crackled with a blinding light. And then, everything went white. When the light faded, I found myself standing at the entrance of the maze, breathing heavily, the cool night air filling my lungs. I glanced around, bewildered, heart racing as I searched for my friends. Had it all been a nightmare? A trick of the mind? But as I looked back toward the maze, the whispers lingered, echoing in my ears like a haunting lullaby. The entrance flickered in and out of view, shadows dancing at the edge of my vision. And then I saw them, figures emerging from the shadows, their faces shrouded in darkness, indistinct yet eerily familiar. I felt a jolt of recognition, but it was quickly swallowed by uncertainty. "Are you okay?" one voice called, and it sounded so much like Ethan's, yet something was off, an echo of a memory distorted through the veil of fear. I stood frozen, the light flickering around me, and in that moment, the maze whispered its promise, a promise that perhaps the darkness would never truly let me go. "Welcome back," the shadowy figures murmured, their voices a chorus of familiarity laced with something far more sinister. As they drew closer, I realized I was not free. The maze had let me out, but it had not released its hold on me. The darkness had merely waited, watching, preparing for the next chapter of our twisted tale. And as I took a step back, the maze shifted once more behind me, the shadows beckoning, promising that the cycle of despair would continue, and I would forever walk the thin line between light and darkness.